Randy, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
The pleasure is mine, Andrea. I'm so excited we get to have another conversation. This time we get to swap places because I had you on my podcast not too long ago.
And that was a true moment of joy, and very grateful for the opportunity. I'm very grateful to have the chance to actually ask you now many questions that I've been thinking about that relate to your journey. Particularly, I've had this curiosity relating to the professional path that you've pursued, given that you're a lawyer and that you're also the host of the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. And I was wondering if we could maybe begin with one question. Can you share with us the pivotal moment in your life that has most shaped your view on life and what you chose to do today?
Oh, that is an interesting question. I would say that there have been a handful of those. And some of them, it's like, people use it sometimes in a negative context where there's like, death by a million cuts. Well, I think there's kind of joy by a million moments, maybe. I just came up with that on the spot, but there are so many tiny moments that have added up to where I am today, and I think you've just opened up the opportunity to give one of my biggest gratitude hacks, I suppose, which is one of the best ways I think we can find joy and gratitude is to look backwards, look in the rearview mirror to those past experiences, to my younger self, and take a moment to give grace and gratitude for my younger self, for the experiences and the sacrifices that my younger self had done to get me to the point where I am today. And that didn't answer specifically any of those moments, but I just want to honor that there are so many of those moments in my life that have all added up to create who I am today, have put me in the place that I'm in today. And then I get to continue that every moment now as a gift to my future self. And so I think that's so important. And the gift of gratitude that I can give to my younger self is actually a gift to my current self because it brings me joy, right? So I'll give a couple examples of specifically relating to gratitude because that's how we connected. And I'm the host of the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. I mean, I lucked out that my last name is Sparks. And so the name of the podcast just sounds great. I could have had a different name and it wouldn't have worked as well. But when I'll express gratitude for my now almost 16-year-old daughter. Her name's Penelope. I've got 3 children that are amazing. Max is 18, Penelope is almost 16, and a 10-year-old daughter, Eva. And my daughter, Penelope, was a tough toddler. And she would kind of, I think she didn't know how to process her emotions when she was a toddler. And she would just get into these fits and she would scream and not stop. And my wife and I would visit with this therapist. He's a positive psychologist. And sometimes we'd just go in and have these conversations with him, and he'd kind of help us remember, everything's okay. We are where we are, and it's all going to be fine, and give us some tools. But in one of these visits that we had with him, he challenged us to begin a daily gratitude practice. And this was, 12 or 15 years ago, a while ago, maybe about 15 years ago. And in part of it, it was when we were visiting with him about just kind of, are we being the worst parents ever to our daughter? Are we going to ruin her? And we realized, no, she's acting age appropriate and everything is fine. And it is all great and it is all good. And we had some tools to work with. But the odd thing that we left with was this challenge to keep a daily gratitude practice. And we began doing that. And it was a simple 5-10 minute daily practice that began in that moment. And now I've filled, volumes of gratitude journals over the years since then. But what we noticed, and it didn't take long, is the world didn't change around us. But at the same time, everything changed. The hurdles and the challenges that we would face didn't disappear, but we did. And so as we began to experience these moments, suddenly I began to see joy and gratitude in my life. I was patient. I was not resentful. I found positivity and joy simply because I've been practicing it daily. And so when challenges came, I had built up some tools and resilience to be able to get through it. So that was one. And it seemed like such a small thing, is an invitation to keep a gratitude journal.
How amazing. And I'm curious to know whether the gratitude journal that you and your wife pursued with following the consultation, how have you actually brought that into your children's lives? Is there a practice or something that you've encouraged them to do since they were young?
Yeah, well, here's the fun news is you can't really force someone else to do something. And this is a hard
Especially kids.
lesson for a parent to learn, but we do have this opportunity to influence. I had someone on the podcast that he says, if you want to live a life of gratitude, don't try to control people, but try to influence them. And that was a guest we had named Bob Goff, who is just amazing. He's written some wonderful books, but he said that on my podcast, and I've never forgot it. He's, don't try to control people, influence people. And my wife and I believe we've attempted that, and we're trying to do that, where we'd sit down and have our meals, and especially when they were younger, we would be eating and just casually say, okay, everybody, let's go around in a circle and take turns and say, what's one thing you're grateful for? And everyone would do that in a circle, and then we'd go around 3 times. And that got into a habit when they were younger, and we'll periodically pull that out. But what I think, what at least the strategy I'm attempting is I have complete control over me and my decisions and behavior. And so whatever my intentional practices are influence the way that I show up as a spouse and a father. And if I can show up and be in that high frequency and energy that brings positive emotions, and I feel all the emotions, I go through all of it. But if I can get myself in a place that I show up for that, and that they feel love and safety from their father, I hope that they see someone who's living a life of gratitude, and then that influences the life that they want to live.
So beautiful. And as I'm thinking about the practice of gratitude that you've instilled with your kids, we've done the same since we were super young, and we also added acts of kindness. And we naturally ask them, "What act of kindness did you do today for others?" Just so they can understand that life as we experience it is not so much always about being self-centered, but being also exposed to the needs and realities of others, and exploring ways that you can maybe bring joy to others in small little ways. So when they were super young, for example, our son once said, well, a little boy fell, and I went with him at the nurse's office, and she put this band-aid on him, and he was so happy that I was there for him. And it was just like these sweet little moments that they were sharing with us since we were super, super young. And I just found it so beautiful and so raw, but it was just so beautiful and so natural for them to bring those acts of kindness, that it inspired us actually to continue seeking and exploring opportunities that we can live life, not only being centered on ourselves, but also finding ways to be altruistic in a multitude of ways and shapes, of course, through our professional lives or our personal lives. And I was curious to know whether that is something also that maybe you have brought into some of these conversations with your kids or your family as a result of all these beautiful conversations around gratitude.
Well, I do think that gratitude and kindness are like overlap so much. I've actually had a few guests on my podcast that have written books about kindness or run organizations related to acts of kindness. I had a guest on the podcast named Chester Elton. He's an author and leadership coach, and has a huge reach. And he wrote a book called Leading with Gratitude, and he does so many great things. And he produces gratitude journals as well. But he said about kindness and gratitude to me that kindness takes gratitude and makes it actionable, right? Where if we live in gratitude, and I think it just kind of is this perpetual rotation of gratitude and kindness kind of rotating with each other, because it just feeds, it just continues to feed on the other side. And so I had another guest who had a neuroscience background, and he was talking about this study. There's at Stanford University, there's a center for, I won't get the name right, and I've done this wrong, but altruistic studies and so on. But they've done this research where they've discovered that when someone performs a sincere act of kindness or compassion, the recipient of that act gets this dose of positive chemicals in their brain that just floods the brain, and then the emotions follow, right? But it's not just the recipient of that act of kindness or generosity, it's the giver as well. They get a similar burst of this dose of these chemicals. But here's the fun part. Even somebody who is an unrelated third-party observer of this act that has no relation to whatever is happening, if they're just an observer and happened to witness this act of kindness and compassion being performed, they also get that dose of positive chemicals released in their brain. And so the effect of an act of kindness and generosity and compassion can have such an amazing effect. And then that bursts into gratitude that lasts for generations, right? I mean, this is building the makeup of our physical body when we can experience these types of things. And so I think kindness and gratitude are just completely intertwined. And I mean, if we know the formula, like if I can perform that simple act of kindness, like you explained with your child at the school, helping somebody out, look what they've done. And then how that can spread. I mean, this is the ripple effect of, throwing a stone into the water. And then, I mean, it might be the smallest stone, but that's going to ripple for who knows how far. So it's amazing.
Yes, so beautiful. And as a result of all these various interviews that you have done, you've already shared some insights. What is one key surprising insight that has emerged about gratitude and joy since you've started the podcast?
I would say that the through line of all the conversations I've had on my podcast with people, and this is people ranging from yourself, to coaches, to CEOs, and to professional athletes or artists or musicians, across the board. Everybody's human, and everybody's traveling through this life on Earth with with their own experiences. They all seem to have this through line of that our experiences in life are happening for us, but not to us. And you were a wonderful example of that. And your story matches so many of other people that I've spoken with, where you've gone through these difficult challenges. In your case, it was brain operations and, removing massive tumors, and you have to surrender this experience and go through these challenges, and your fear of losing your smile and what might happen through these difficult experiences, maybe even death, right? Or I watch other people go through horrible, terrible experiences. They're professional athletes and they crash and their whole body is mangled, and they wonder, well, now what? But then finding through that experience the resilience and the hope and the flecks of gold and the people who love and support them that lift them out of that. So what I see is that people find resilience, strength, and gratitude in those hard experiences. That's where it's born. It's easy for me to be grateful for the given gifts, and I'm grateful for chocolate chip cookies, and I'm grateful for a kiss on the cheek from my daughter. But what about the loss of my job? What about the brain surgery? What about the divorce or the bankruptcy? That these things that people experience that are so difficult and dark, and how people have the resilience to look back and frame those experiences of, I'm not grateful for the death of my spouse, but I am grateful for the things I've learned and the connections I've made that have come out of that, right? And that's where joy comes, is because they're able to find that in that experience. And I saw that in you, and your smile shines when you express what's come from that. You've become Wonder Woman. You've transcended the challenge.
Thank you. I mean, you're so kind, and it's interesting because through my podcast, as you've known, and as we've spoken in the past, I've come through similar insights that actually it's those adversities, as you're referring to them, that often shape who we are. And as long as we can explore the lessons learned and be grateful for what life has brought in front of us, and the experiences maybe that we maybe never wished for have actually helped us grow into a better human being. And that's a richness of life, actually. That's a beauty of life. And so it's really interesting that we're getting similar insights from our respective conversations with all the guests that you have had on your podcast and that I've had with my guests on this podcast.
Yeah, and
And
what I think's oh, excuse me, but what I
no,
think's
go ahead.
revealing about that is we're coming from all over the world and having our experience in our different places, but we're human and we're experiencing this human experience. And what it shows to me is that I hear somebody else having their version of a challenging experience and still thriving and finding a smile. And then I learned that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one, right? And suddenly I feel, oh, like I can do this. I find hope when I see that somebody else, they've gone through that hard thing. They were shunned by their community for whatever challenge they went through, or they had a loss of a partner, and they still find joy and a smile by getting through that. Now, what I think I want to be careful of is it's hard for me to say, and I'm not, and I wouldn't dare say that, oh, you should be grateful for this hard experience. Oh, that's I think a little too much, because I wouldn't be grateful. I'm not grateful for the heartache of losing somebody, or that pain and the betrayal. I'm not grateful for that. So how do we think about being grateful for the hard stuff? Right? The experience is in fact difficult, and sometimes it's not of our own making. Sometimes we're a victim of circumstances outside of our control, right? And we are simply in that experience, and it is hard. Honor that it's hard. Honor that those emotions are there, and feel them and process them. And then coming through that, we can look backwards and then start to gain a sense of gratitude for ourself, for our strength and resilience to be able to get through that experience. The experience itself, I don't think I'm going to ask like, oh, I hope something really difficult happens to me so I can be grateful for it. I think it's a different question. It's, I will encounter challenges. Sometimes they might be beyond what I believe I can endure, because it's happened to other people, and who my guests who've gone through things way harder than I have, and have endured it, and have found a way to find that joy. And so I think it's having control of that story afterwards.
Absolutely. And what practices do you believe are important for an individual actually to put into place despite challenges and despite circumstances that arise that often are outside of our control, as you were saying, for example, losing their job, or circumstances that really are just very difficult emotionally? How would you recommend some of our listeners move forward from all the wisdom and insights that you have gathered from your own experience and the interviews you have had to date, in order to help these individuals see life with a fresh perspective and be able to avoid going in that dark spot whereby many individuals sadly find themselves, where they're on antidepressants and have mental health issues, and sometimes, in some extreme cases it can even lead to suicide? What have been some of the most profound practices that you feel would be necessary to avoid falling to that dark spot?
Wow, I wish I was qualified to answer that question, Andrea.
No, but from your experience, I'd love to get
Yeah.
your insights, because it happens.
Well,
As I said, we all have, good and bad days. And
yeah.
how do we make sure that those bad days never, you know, become our day-to-day reality.
This is something. So from my own experience, I know and still believe that a daily gratitude practice, writing in a gratitude journal daily, that's not the ultimate solution. This is like the most surface level, but that got me started on a path of changing the way my mind works and what I choose to see. Someone else on my podcast says that you get what you see and you see what you seek. And so it kind of transforms, well, what am I looking for? There's a phenomenon, now I don't remember the name of it, but it's, if I'm out, looking for a car and I buy a brand new car that's a yellow this, then suddenly everywhere I go, that's all I see. It's because I've kind of trained my mind to look for those and notice those things. And so if we train our mind to notice the kindness, the generosity, the gratitude, the joy, then if we can build those muscles, especially in a time when we are not just depleted and in that state of depression, then hopefully when we are, or if that's approaching, then we might be better equipped to endure that. Something that I think is also helpful, it's awareness and accountability. Awareness and accountability that we have within us the decision and the choice to make. And sometimes I and others it may feel easier to give the power to someone else, that someone else has caused us to feel what we're feeling. And then I'm powerless because it's all somebody else's fault, right? But where do I have accountability? And this comes, and we might have even talked about this with you and Christoph, but even in the most horrific example is Viktor Frankl said that even in the concentration camp, everything can be taken from them except for a man's ability to choose his attitude in any given set of circumstances. And so I feel like awareness of my own thoughts, feelings, and perspectives, and kind of being aware of that and being accountable to that, to me, because I can decide, I can choose for me how I approach. And it's not easy, but I think that's the starting point. And that begins if I can be aware and kind of crack my heart open to take some accountability.
It's so important. I fully agree. Randy, can you tell us why you chose to be a lawyer?
Oh, this is a fun one. So this came out of nowhere too. And it's funny that many years, 15 years or, into being a lawyer, I started a podcast about gratitude. And I had somebody ask me, oh, so, how are you doing this? Is that so you can get business as a lawyer? And I laughed. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? But because it's totally unrelated. But then when I look back at it, I'm like, it's completely related because it's me. I'm bringing me and what matters to me into whatever I'm part of. And so I went to college and got a degree, got a master's degree in public administration, and got a job in Texas. I was going to work in city management, and I learned in 5 minutes on the job, I'm like, this is not where I belong. And I had been thinking of the idea of going to law school because my grandparents were at that time had passed away not long before, and I was learning about estate planning, and that's the kind of attorney I am. And so I decided I wanted to be an estate planning attorney. And then I told my family, I told one of my sisters, and she says, but Randy, you're the nice one. I'm one of 8 siblings. And she says, Randy, you're the nice one. Why do you want to be a lawyer? And I explained that I wanted to be an estate planning attorney because I can help. Then I didn't have it concisely defined, but in essence, I said, I can deliver peace of mind to people. I'm not suing people or helping with divorces and bankruptcies and criminal things. I'm helping people feel something. But it took me years to realize that that's what it was. That's why I chose that type of law. But then after practicing for years, I realized people think they're hiring me to plan their estates and make sure that they can have their wealth be used for positive things and efficiently, and for philanthropy and tax efficiency, and to benefit their children and descendants, and it's so fun to do this. But what they're really hiring me for is not for a stack of documents. They're hiring me to feel something. They want to feel peace of mind that they've got all this organized. And once I realized that, then it was on, because then I knew how to engage with people, and I'm like, this is who I am. And because aside from that, I was passionate about gratitude. I started, what's called Sparks of Gratitude, and I just started printing gratitude journals long before the podcast, and I've given away thousands of them to people over the years. And so to all of my clients, anytime I'd finish a project for somebody, I'd give them that and a gratitude journal.
Really?
I'd say, I want to give you the gift of gratitude. This is my thank you card. and I hope that people have used them over the years, but at least I've given people the opportunity for that. But that's why I became a lawyer. I love it. I feel like I get to work with amazing people. A lot of them have turned into friends, and I just, it feeds me joy. So.
And who has taught you the most profound lesson about gratitude and life?
I would say the most profound lesson, I would probably point to a group, and that would be my family, my wife and my 3 children. Because with them, and specifically my wife, I'll talk about her because she is the most wonderful thing that's ever happened in my life. In so many ways, I feel I'm so lucky that I encountered her. But I also think it was divine that we connected, how we did and when we did. But we've been married almost 21 years. In March of 2025, it'll be 21 years. And I don't know when this podcast will come out, but that'll be 21 years for us. And sometimes people, and I myself, I love it when people accomplish things and they talk about the difficult accomplishments that they've reached, whether it was they ran their first marathon or climbed a mountain or they finished law school or they did something amazing. They published their first book. And I'm so excited to hear when people do things like that. But what I don't hear often, Andrea, is people say, I've been married for 20 years as an accomplishment. Because that, to me, I've run marathons and I've climbed mountains and I've done a lot of things and accomplished things that to me are meaningful, and I cry my eyes out when I do it because it just means so much because of the work that went in behind it. But the work that we've had to do, and imagine the forgiveness and love and patience that have all had to exist for us to belong in a 20-year marriage. And when I look back at that, she is an angel for being with me for all of this. And I think together we both are looking at this same goal. And how could I not be more grateful? That's the biggest influence to me on gratitude, is how fortunate I am to have somebody that is aiming the same direction as me. And for the most part, to be honest, I'm 5 steps behind her, following her on this journey. So she's way more impressive than I am.
Why do you say that you're 5 steps behind?
I think her maturity and intuition are just amazing. Her connection with the divine, and just knowing what is good and what is right and what's going to lead to a new, better version of herself and our family. She just is very quick to that. I take a lot longer to process. And so if something's presented to me, I'm like, okay, I got to process this. I got to think about it. And it drives her crazy because she's like, well, I already know it's the thing we got to do. And I got to think about it for a long time. And so that's why I'm 5 steps behind. And, but the reality is I think we match up well because I've learned to trust when she's sure about something. I trust her so much that I say, okay, well, let's do this.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask you if there would be a recipe for joy, what would be the 3 ingredients? But maybe you can also elaborate if there would be a recipe for a long marriage, long and happy marriage, what would be the recipe for that? Would you be open to answering those two questions?
Oh, the recipe for joy and the recipe for a long and happy marriage. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Well, I would say the same answer could exist for both, but specifically with the relationship, I mean, I would lean on. I'm not an authority. I'm not a marriage. I would read what the Gottmans talk about on marriage and things like that, and or if people are faithful, and that's helpful when people kind of share the same faith traditions and can have the same goals that they're aiming at together. That's helpful. But one thing I would say that is tremendously helpful for my relationship, and I think it would translate, is forgiveness. Like the power of forgiveness and grace and patience in a relationship, like that's what makes it last. Because we are not constantly in the state of the honeymoon phase and desire and fun. It's, well, we're going through all the hard stuff together too, and we're going to disappoint each other. And our commitment is to aim the same direction through all of that. And I believe that our joy together is as big or greater than any of our disappointments. But we've committed to endure the disappointments together. So, and just the capacity and commitment to forgive each other in any of those, I think, is just amazing.
I love that. So going back to the recipe for joy specifically, and if there would be three main ingredients, what would they be? I mean, I know forgiveness is one of them.
Yeah, I think forgiveness. I would be kind of betraying my whole theme if I didn't say gratitude. And hope. I think hope is really important. And I talk about hope a lot. I mean, gratitude, we can get the conversation, and I talk about it on my podcast all the time. If people want to check out the podcast, and they can listen to that. But hope is something that I think is so amazing. And I keep thinking of why hope matters. And hope is we can't see what's coming, but we hope for it. And I contrast that with expectation. Expectation leads to disappointment. And in its best case, expectation leads to satisfaction. But hope opens the world for transcendent joy. Because when we hope for something, it gives me the strength to move toward something. And then when the good comes, I just have transcendent and ecstatic joy.
I have this urge to ask you this crazy question that relates to free will. As you're talking about hope, it brought this to the surface. And there's a lot of research on neuroscience about free will, and whether debates on whether we have it or not, and whether our trajectory in life is set or not. And it's interesting because I was interviewing a person a couple of months ago who is nearly 88 years old, and he was saying that he truly believes that our life trajectory is already set for us the moment we are born. I was curious to get your thoughts on that.
That is an interesting one, and I would love to hear his explanation of that and what and why. I believe in free will. I believe that is the reason that I am on earth. I happen to believe in my faith tradition that I chose to come to this earth, and that my spirit entered this physical body on this earth, and that I have been given, and the purpose of my life on this earth is to engage in free will and choice. And that divinity, my higher power, trusts me that I'm capable of making choices that will be productive in my life, and was also willing to allow me to make poor choices that might hurt me. Because I mean, how many good and bad choices have I made in my life? All the time. And I'm not, I think poor choices that I've made in my life have been as powerful or even more powerful than the good ones, because that's where my lessons are learned. And that's where I learned, don't put my hand on the hot stove. or don't talk like that to somebody, it doesn't turn out well. But I do believe in free will. But is there some, predestined divine destiny that it's all kind of mapped out? I mean, this is a whole other, question about like infinity and had it all been laid out before. But I believe that in this world, I have the ability to choose, and I have the ability to gain the joy from those decisions.
If you could challenge our audience to try one gratitude exercise this week, what would it be?
Ooh, this one's fun. And I already mentioned it before, but I would say do this. And the best way to do it would be actually to write it down. But even if you don't write it down, if you just pause for a few minutes and you just pause and think about your younger self, and maybe even pick your younger self at a specific moment in time, but just look backwards and just meditate on that and think about this younger version of yourself that's already existed in the past. You know them better than anybody else ever, and you know every little experience that younger self has gone through to arrive where you are now. And write yourself a letter of gratitude. Write a letter of gratitude to that younger version of yourself. This doesn't need to take a long time. 10, 20 minutes. But just write that letter of gratitude to your younger self and watch what happens. Watch what happens.
I love that. And how can our listeners create a ripple effect of joy in this world, particularly with a lot of the challenges that we see around us?
I believe that we don't have control over people around us, but we have control over ourselves. And then if we take control of ourselves, or we're intentional about how we do the work for ourselves, then that version of ourselves can show up, and that can be an influence externally. And so we can perform that act of kindness. But it first takes, I need to become the person that can show up to be the one that delivers that act of kindness, that gives that smile, that behaves in that way that can influence somebody else.
If you could write a message that would be put in a time capsule and that would be read by someone 100 years from now, what would that message be?
Oh, it would be one of encouragement of you are enough, and don't stress too much about it. You are great right where you are. Believe that.
Wonderful. Any final words of wisdom as it relates to gratitude or joy, Randy?
Well, I think my words of wisdom may just be my expression of gratitude to you for the sacrifice of time and the passion and commitment to share joy with the world, and the ripple effect that you are setting out to have. I can't wait till your 1 million years of joy turns into 2 and 3 million, because the world is starving for joy, for gratitude, for hope, for love, for kindness. The world's starving for these things, and it takes someone like you or anybody that's listening. You can be a part of that, to just add to that. And imagine if one person does an act of kindness and that person does an act of kindness, that will ripple throughout the world. So, but it starts with someone like you deciding to begin that. So I'm so grateful you're doing this, and that you wanted to have a little old me on this podcast. I've watched so many of your other guests, and I feel like to be in that company is an honor.
Well, thank you immensely, Randy. It's been an immense pleasure. It's been very joyful to speak with you today. Thank you.